academic lecture featuring none other than one of the modern-day champions of scientific literacy, Dr. Michael Shermer. After earning his master's degree in experimental psychology from Cal State Fullerton, my alma mater, go Titans, Dr. Shermer began teaching psychology courses and promoting critical thinking at Glendale College. He completed his PhD in the history of science from Claremont Graduate School in 1991, writing a dissertation on Alfred Russel Wallace, the evolutionary theorist who exists purely in the shadow of Charles Darwin. That same year, while continuing his teaching career at Cal State Los Angeles as well as Occidental College, Dr. Shermer decided to take his lessons to a wider audience and became the founding publisher and editor-in-chief of Skeptic magazine and the executive director of the Skeptics Society. From there, his voice has only gotten stronger and stronger. He has now written 15 books on science, skepticism, and teaching. He has co-produced and co-hosted a 13-hour television series called Exploring the Unknown. He has composed countless articles, book reviews, and editorials. He also contributes regularly as the science correspondent at KPCC, the NPR affiliate in Los Angeles. Also as a monthly columnist for Scientific American and as a featured speaker at multiple TED events. He has appeared on such television shows as The Colbert Report, 2020, Dateline, Charlie Rose, and Larry King Live. He is an absolute tireless defender of science. Not only is Dr. Shermer promoting the use of skepticism and the scientific method as our best tools to understand the universe, but he attacks and regularly debunks myths, superstitions, and urban legends. But he doesn't stop there. In his latest book, The Believing Brain, he has synthesized research on the field to offer an explanation for how and why humans are even capable of holding beliefs of any kind in the first place. It is a fantastic book, which, by the way, you can all pick up tonight and have him sign at the book signing right after his talk. My personal favorite aspect of his book is how Dr. Shermer uses his own personal journey with belief as the key example. Starting as a born-again Christian in high school, traveling through his long-distance cycling career where he began to question his beliefs about nutrition and health, to graduate school where he began to question his larger belief systems until he made his commitment to his current position of skeptic. Dr. Shermer has been a hero of mine since the late 1990s when I first got my hand on his now classic book, Why People Believe Weird Things. And I see him as a model for the effective teaching of skepticism and critical thinking. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you right now, Dr. Michael Shermer.
Good evening. How we doing? Normal? Nice to see you all. I really appreciate you coming out. Getting a tiny little bit of feedback there. Can you hear me okay? How about if I walk away from the mic, can you still hear me okay? So we're not on Verizon, we're on AT&T. No, it's the other way. So I'm the publisher of this magazine, Skeptic Magazine. We investigate claims of the paranormal, pseudoscience, fringe groups, and cults and claims of all kinds between good science, junk science, bad science, voodoo science, pathological science, non-science, and plain old nonsense. And unless you've been abducted by aliens and been on Mars for the past couple decades, you know, there's a lot of it out there. Nonsense, that is. Some people call us debunkers, but let's face it, there's a lot of bunk that needs debunking, and that's part of our job. Our other job, though, is to explain why people believe what they believe, the psychology of belief, the anthropology of belief, the sociology of belief, to try to understand how to change people's minds, teach people how to think critically, which is what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Now, this is just a small sampling of the magazine we've been publishing for 20 years. You can join at skeptic.com. I'll show you in just a minute. And every issue has a particular theme to it. Like this one is on the future of intelligence. Are people getting smarter or dumber? Well, I'm from Southern California, so I have an opinion about this myself. But in fact, it turns out people are getting smarter. Believe it or not, we're getting smarter by about 3 IQ points every decade for about the past century. It's called the Flynn effect, after the eponymous James Flynn, the psychologist who discovered it, when he analyzed the data from IQ test companies that produce the IQ tests, and that they have to renorm their tests and make them harder because of this progressive increase that people are getting smarter. So that's encouraging. We're getting smarter. I'm not sure about our computers. We did one on artificial intelligence. When will computers achieve human-level intelligence? And we concluded that we're 5 years away, and always will be. The It's a really hard problem. We did one on 9/11 conspiracies. Was 9/11 a conspiracy? Yes, actually it was. By definition, 19 members of Al-Qaeda plotting to fly planes into buildings without telling us ahead of time constitutes a conspiracy. But that's not what the 9/11 truthers think. They think it was an inside job by the Bush administration. This, by the way, they simultaneously think is the most incompetent administration we've ever had, somehow pulled off the most sophisticated, intelligent conspiracy of all time. That's very typical of the way conspiracy theorists think. And the long and the short run of that is the more people you have to have involved, the less likely the conspiracy theory is to be true, because A, people are incompetent, and the chances of all of them getting it just right at the right time and everything coming together is very slow, very slim. And two, people can't keep their mouths shut. People can't wait to tell somebody about the inside secret. We did one on Ponzi schemes, scam schemes, things like that. That's the eponymous Charles Ponzi. This was on the heels of the Bernie Madoff scam. How is it that people, intelligent people, educated people, can be suckered into scams? And they can. Actually, even easier in many ways, because they think they're so smart that they can't be fooled, that you can fool them even easier that way. We do a lot on climate change and global warming. Those are illustrations, not photographs, by the way. And fortunately, this was not the last issue of our magazine. The world did not end in 2012, so that was a good thing. And you can join the Skeptic Society and subscribe to Skeptic Magazine at skeptic.com. This is our latest issue, by the way. We took on gun control. I've been touring the country doing gun debates, proposing just the modest amount of, like, let's have background checks so crazy people can't buy guns. And even that, even at audiences like this, at universities and colleges across the country, I'm treated like a pariah. Like, I just suggested we ban the Constitution, just for suggesting. People are very emotional about a lot of these issues, which is why we like to take them on. And when you join the Skeptic Society, you get to meet our mascot, our skeptical dog. There he is. He's skeptical. So let me show you a little video clip here. Actually, I'll show you our webpage. This is our webpage, skeptic.com. This is our latest issue. And so we have lectures at Caltech. We do geology tours. And we have eSkeptic, which is free. Anybody can join eSkeptic at any time. We have Junior Skeptic for kids. We have a podcast, and we even have the Khan Academy. You can join the Khan Academy if you'd like to know how to be a con artist. So I'll show you the video here. Hang on one second. And this is the Khan Academy. By the way, that's the phone number to call. Some of you may recognize that number. If somebody named Jenny answers, those of you that are young and don't get that, just Google that phone number and you'll see. Okay, let's watch this. It's just 2 minutes long.
I got a better future for me and my family.
I got a career helping others.
One phone call changed my life. I called the Khan Academy.
At the Khan Academy, we believe in you. Heck, we believe in just about anything.
At the Khan Academy, you can be fully trained and ready for an exciting new career in the paranormal in as little as 8 months.
We know with our hearts and our minds, and because we have a dictionary, that you can't spell confidence without con. We looked it up.
That's why we work hard to build confidence in our trainees, because believing really is seeing.
Square.
Hit.
Circle.
Wow, hit.
Star.
That's amazing. You just went 10 for 10.
Really?
No, but you did get this one right.
Oh my God.
And that feeling you're having right now, your clients will feel that too. They'll remember the hits and forget the misses.
That's exactly what I'm doing. Why am I doing that?
Psychologists call this the confirmation bias, where you look for and find confirming evidence for what you already believe, and you ignore the disconfirming evidence. People want to believe, and your clients will too.
But your Khan Academy training won't stop at the classroom door. We go one step beyond with practical, real-world training.
I'm feeling a strong spirit coming through here from the other side, someone who's passed over, maybe an M name, no, an N name. K, perhaps? No, oh wait, no, it's an L? Is
oh my God, my Uncle Larry. He passed like 2 years ago.
Yes.
Does he have a message for me?
Hang on, he does. He says everything is gonna be okay, and that he loves you as only an uncle can.
Oh my God! There's no way he could have known that he was my uncle.
It really is that easy, so don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Classes are starting soon, and financial aid is available.
We'll have one of our current students help you out with the lottery numbers.
I'm getting a 7.
The Khan Academy. Because you may not know what the future holds.
And neither do we.
Incomparable Brian Dalton, or Mr. Deity, for those of you familiar with that. If you don't know Mr. Deity, just Google it and you'll see it's really quite a character. So in science, what is skepticism? Science is skepticism, skepticism is science. But in science, we look for natural explanations for natural phenomena. Before we say something is out of this world, let's first make sure that it's not in this world. That is, before we, let's say, go back to thinking about what's more likely, that aliens traverse the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Farmer Bob's field in Puckerbrush, Kansas to make a crop circle that says skeptic.com, or that somebody with Photoshop just made a fake photo slide for me. Or before you ask the question, what's more likely, that aliens traverse the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Sacramento, California to help the governor, or that the World Weekly News just makes stuff up? We have no evidence whatsoever of aliens landing anywhere. We have lots of evidence of tabloid newspapers and magazines just making things up. So as Carl Sagan liked to say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is one of the sort of hallmark quotes or epigrams of skepticism. That is, the more outrageous or the more outlandish or the more extreme your claim, the burden of proof is on you to provide extraordinary evidence for it. Or as Christopher Hitchens liked to say, in the opposite of that, what I have elevated to a dictum, Hitchens' dictum, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. And you can almost hear him growling it, can't you? So the burden of proof is on the person making the extraordinary claim, not on the skeptics. So when somebody says, can you prove there is no Bigfoot? I don't even have to answer the question. I just have to say, sorry, you have to provide evidence for Bigfoot. It's not my job to provide evidence that there is no Bigfoot. And that's the way it works in science. The burden of proof is on the person making the new claim, proposing the new hypothesis or theory. Evolution was once an extraordinary claim. And over the course of a century, it accumulated extraordinary evidence. And now, 99.9% of the rest of the world believes it, and about 40% of Americans believe it, which tells us that some people need more education. We need more science education. Sometimes people are just wrong. As Isaac Asimov wrote in The Relativity of Wrong, this is one of my favorite short essays of his, when people thought the Earth was flat, they were wrong. When people thought the Earth was spherical, they were wrong. The Earth is like an oblate spheroid. It's a little fatter on the equator, and it's a little fatter on the bottom than the top, so it's not a perfect sphere. But if you think that thinking the Earth is spherical is just as wrong as thinking the Earth is flat, then your view is wronger than both of them put together. We actually make progress in science. Richard Dawkins said, when two opposite points of view are expressed with equal intensity, the truth does not necessarily lie exactly halfway between them. It is possible for one side to be simply wrong. Just think about the age of the Earth. So we know it to be about 4.6 billion years old. Young Earth creationists think it's less than 10,000 years old. They often say it's something like 6,000 years old, so about 4,000 BC. About the time the Babylonians invented beer is when the young Earth creationists think that the universe was created. Okay, so the truth is not halfway between those, where you end up at like 158,000 years old or something like that. No, sorry, one side is just simply wrong. As a favorite example of this, how science is self-correcting. We can actually improve the public understanding of science through education, through pop culture. In England, there's a popular singer named Katie Millau, and she wrote a best-selling album and song called 9 Million Bicycles. And it goes something like this. There's 9 million bicycles in Beijing. That's a fact. It's a thing we can't deny, like the fact that I will love you till I die. We are 12 billion light years from the edge. That's a guess.
No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I will always be with you. So it's a lovely song. I'll play a portion of it for you in a moment. But my friend Simon Singh, who's a science writer, he's a physicist, and wrote a book called The Big Bang and the History of the Universe. And so when this song became very popular, he wrote an op-ed piece about this in The Guardian, in which basically he sort of complained a little bit about those lyrics. So if you go back to the lyrics, we're 12 billion light years from the edge. Well, that's not really quite right. We actually have it much more refined on the exact. It's really 13.7 plus or minus, because there's error bars on the estimates based on how the science is done. And there is no edge of the universe. It's the edge of the observable universe. This is just what we can see. We don't know, what's on the other side. And it's not a guess. It really is not a guess. We have a lot of data accumulated over the past century from observatories all over the world. And so although it's true, we don't use the word true in science. We do make predictions based on the best available information that we have. So anyway, so Simon wrote this op-ed piece in The Guardian about Katie Malau's bad science, and much to his surprise, she contacted him and said, I'm kind of embarrassed because I was always an astronomy fan, so I want to get it right. So she took the song and kind of rewrote it. Here's the original part of the song.
We are 12 billion light years from the edge. That's a guess. No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I will always be with you.
So to get it right, they appeared together in a radio station, and she recut the song.
We are 30.7 billion light years from the edge of the observable universe. That's a good estimate with well-defined error bars, and with the available information, I predict that I will always be with you.
You gotta love that. So let's go through some of these interesting questions that people have and how a skeptic analyzes them, how we should think critically about them. Are aliens coming to Earth? Are UFOs their spacecraft? First of all, we should ask that what's more likely question I asked before, that they represent spacecraft from other worlds or anomalies from this world. This is a UFO photograph taken from my house in Altadena, and that's the bush at the edge of my cliff, and that's Palos Verdes down there, and there's Catalina, and downtown LA is over here. And here it is again. You can see downtown LA a little clearer there. There's the UFO hovering above my house. Here it is making a dive across the sky. Here you can see the engine, the rocket engine was, lighting up. Well, if that looks like a hubcap, because that's what it was. So basically, these are just for a television show. We filmed how to fake your own UFO photographs. Here's another one. This is just a little toy model that's about that big around, and I just had some fishing line and a long pole that I had in my garage for trimming branches high up in a tree, and I just dangled it there and took some pictures. That's just the San Gabriel Mountains there. So for the show, there's another way to do it. You get a piece of glass, and so this is the TV crew there. That's my daughter. There's downtown Pasadena there, and so you take some coins and some double-sided tape. We just take some tape and flip it over. It's best with like a quarter and 2 dimes or 2 nickels, so you have like the mothership and the 2 little baby ships. And for some reason, the UFOs always travel in triangular shapes, and so then you just basically you focus on infinity. There's downtown LA, and you get the UFO sighting over Los Angeles. Now, that's not to say that all UFO photographs are faked, but obviously, if it's this easy to do, and if it's this easy to misinterpret photographs of other things that are naturally in the environment. In any case, the fact that I can't explain every single UFO sighting doesn't mean extraterrestrials are visiting. It just means you can't explain everything. So there's another principle of skepticism in science. It's called the residue problem in science. There's always a residue of unexplained mysteries in any particular theory. And what do you do with them? Nothing, or you assign them to graduate students to figure out. That's what they're for. But seriously, I mean, that's what scientists do. They answer unsolved mysteries. They uncover solutions to problems. They fill gaps. Whereas the gap fillers on the other side want to turn those gaps into their pet theories. Unidentified just means we don't know. It doesn't mean extraterrestrial. So I want to believe, but I also want to know. And there's often a difference between the way the world, I would like the world to be, and the way that it actually is. So my talk tonight is really about my book, The Believing Brain. And so we begin with the belief engine. Our brains are belief engines. We're pattern-seeking primates, connecting the dots. A appears connected to B, and this is called association learning. So you remember from your intro psych class with Pavlov's dog, you ring the bell and give him some food and he salivates, and you ring the bell and give him some food and he salivates, you ring the bell and he salivates. He's become conditioned to it. It's a conditioned stimulus, and he's associated the bell with the food, and his body responds accordingly. Or in the case of the rat that doesn't know about bar pressing, you throw him in the box, and he's very motivated to find something because you haven't fed him since yesterday. You can't do this with intro students, by the way. They have to be fed. But if you give them other motivations, like you have a choice between doing this massive, boring term paper, or you can participate in our experiment. And so they will work for food. And anyway, you throw him in there, and he learns quickly to associate the clicking sound that you make when you hit this little button, and a little pellet comes down that little chute there into the little bucket, and he reaches in there and gets it because he's hungry. So I used to do this at Cal State Fullerton. I was a grad student in a Skinnerian lab. Show you how long ago this was. That was a cutting-edge computer back in the day, and this was really cutting-edge. This was a Texas Instrument programmable calculator. Very exciting that we had this thing. Now, a lot of you won't recognize these, but these were called pencils. And these are data sheets. And so this was one of my pigeons. He was pecking the left key or the right key, and we wanted to know if you reinforced him twice as often for pressing the left key than the right key, would he press the left key twice as often? And the answer is not quite. Didn't quite fit the matching law. But that's neither here nor there. It turns out that if you randomly assign him a reinforcement, whatever he happened to be doing just before he got the reinforcement, he'll repeat that behavior. In fact, that is the very definition of a reinforcement, is anything that causes the organism to repeat the behavior. So if he's just walking around and he's moving around the cage like this, and he bumps it with his wing, and the food comes and reinforces it, he'll think, oh, I should just do that again and repeat it. And that's called superstition. This was discovered by Skinner in the 1950s, since replicated in lots and lots of experiments. Whenever you associate one stimulation with another stimulation, then the organism begins to learn it. And if you think that's just a product of having a bird brain, you should go to Las Vegas and see it at work there. I call this process patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise, in which we make two types of errors. A type 1 error is false positive, that is, believing a pattern is real when it isn't. You think A is connected to B, but it's not. And a type 2 error, or false negative, is not believing a pattern is real when it is. You don't think A is connected to B, and it turns out that it is. So for our thought experiment for tonight, imagine you're a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. You're a little Australopithecine. Your name is Lucy. And you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator, or is it just the wind? Your next decision could cost you your life. If you believe that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator, and it turns out it's just the wind, that's a low-cost error to make. No harm, no foul. You just become more vigilant and cautious, and you move carefully around it. On the other hand, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is just the wind, and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, your lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. So patternicity occur whenever the cost of making a type 1 error is less than the cost of making a type 2 error. The problem is assessing the difference between type 1 and type 2 errors is highly problematic, especially in the split-second life and death situations. So the default position is just to assume that all patterns are real. That is, just assume all rustles in the grass are dangerous predators and not the wind, just in case. Now, you might ask, how come these organisms can't just sit there in the grass? Why can't Lucy sit there in the grass and collect more data just to be sure which one it is? Because sitting there in the grass, waiting to see what it is will also get you a Darwin Award. Because predators don't wait around for prey animals to collect more data. That's the whole point of being stealthy and stalking your prey, is so that they can't get any more data. So therefore, we evolved this natural propensity to assume that all patterns are real and all patternicities represent real and important phenomena, and we are the descendants of those most successful patternicity primates. In other words, superstition and magical thinking is a byproduct of the way the brain works. It's not a problem of education or intelligence. People that have these patterns are not stupid. They're us. All of us have these propensities. So let me just run through some fun examples of patternicities. That is, things that are not real, but they look real. They look like real patterns. You can just tell me what you think you see here. What does this look like? A horse. That's right. So a horse is a horse is a horse, of course. How about here? A cow. Well, that's pretty good for a Southern California audience. Usually people in the Midwest get this right away, but there, you see the cow there? Yeah, there it is. So by putting the red line around it, I'm giving you a prime, a cognitive prime. I'm priming your brain. That's what you're supposed to see. When I go back, there it is. Right? How about here? There's the Dalmatian dog. And when I take the prime away, you can see it better, because by giving you the prime, I'm telling you this is what you're supposed to see, and then you will see it. We'll see many examples of cognitive primes in this lecture. How about here? Planet Saturn, or maybe a sombrero, some people see, something like that. How about here? There's nothing here. But if you think you saw something, then see me afterwards, because this is a sign of brain damage. No, just kidding. Often what we're thinking about determines what we see in random patterns. For example, because we've all been sensitized to the environment and save the whales and save the dolphins, you of course see the dolphins here, correct? There's a dolphin there. There's a dolphin. A little happy-faced dolphin there. It's a dolphin. It's a dolphin. That's a dolphin tail there, guys. Dolphin tail. What does this look like?
Girls bikini. No?
Sandals? Come on, you guys have seen this already. I said, what does it look like, not what it is. Yes, of course, these are ads for Via Uno sandals. Carefully cropped in order to trigger the pattern you already have stored in your brain of, you know. Here's the impossible crate illusion. This is often a fun one because it tricks the brain into thinking that the boards flip back and forth, the back to the front. This board appears to sort of warp around this front board, which then becomes the back board. When this becomes the front of the thing, you go, okay, but it's easy to fool the brain in 2D, Shermer. How about 3D? Well, here's the impossible crate illusion in 3D from my friend, the late, great Jerry Andrus, who is a magician who specialized in constructing three-dimensional illusions out of 2D illusions. Can you see how it's done? Camera angle is everything. So the photographer is way over here to the left, and this board appears to overlap with this one, this overlaps with this one has a cable in it, and so on. But even knowing how it works, it's still very potent. So the reason these work is because you already have patterns in your memory of the way things are supposed to look in the real world from experience. And the magician then plays on that. The magician knows what you expect to see and then surprises you with something different. This is an interesting illusion, and so part of my point here is to show how easy it is to be deceived. It turns out that the Leaning Tower of Pisa is not actually leaning. No, I'm just kidding. The illusion here is that these are the same photographs side by side. I could put a rule up to show you. And the way this illusion works is that you are comparing this relatively short angle to this relatively long angle because they're side by side. When in fact you should be comparing this angle to that angle. Of course, they're exactly the same. It's just the same photograph side by side. This particular illusion won a Best Illusion of the Year award. Yes, there's a contest for that. You can see it here on this effect. It's the same photograph side by side. You can tell from the people here, people there. But again, you're comparing that angle to that angle. And so it looks kind of disjarring. It doesn't look like they can possibly be side by side, the exact same photographs. Faces are very popular. We often see faces in only a handful of data points. Here, you only need 3 data points, 2 eyes and a mouth, to get the effect. You recognize, of course, our president, but if you look at this for a few seconds, you'll notice one of them looks a little odd compared to the other one. Which one looks a little strange? The one on the right? Okay, I'm going to rotate it, so this one on the left is going to now be on the right. This was actually discovered decades ago by a psychologist at York University using Margaret Thatcher, who's kind of scary either way. So the reason this works is because in your temporal lobe you have an area called the fusiform gyrus that specializes in facial recognition. Let's just say it's your face recognition software of your brain. And there's 2 neural networks in there. One fires fairly rapidly, called the magnocellular pathway, and that's just for scanning a general face. 2 eyes and a mouth, boom, it's a face. And we all recognize faces instantly. Then you have the slower firing neural pathway called the parvocellular pathway that looks for facial details such as the eyes and the nose and the mouth. So after recognizing, oh, it's a face, it's the president, then you start scanning the details. You go, wait, there's something wrong with the eye there. That looks a little weird, right? And so you can read about the fusiform gyrus in Oliver Sacks's new book on hallucinations, because if there's damage to this area through tumors or strokes or just a miswiring, people have a hard time recognizing faces. Sometimes they can't even recognize their own face in a mirror. Talk about 51st dates with yourself. The face on Mars is very popular. This was photographed in 1976 by the Viking spacecraft before it landed. And of course, this got the ufologists very excited that Martians were sending signals to us from the Martian surface by constructing these monumental architectural designs like a face. Somehow they look like us. And so a letter writing campaign to NASA got the good folks at JPL to actually photograph it close up in 2000 from the Mars Observatory spacecraft orbiting Mars. And it's just an eroded mountain. But if you squint, you can kind of see the face pop back out. Because by squinting, you can see, well, there's an eye, there's an eye, there's a nose, there's a mouth. And by squinting, you're reducing the granularity of the data from that fine grain to coarse grain, and that gives your fusiform gyrus to kick in and see the face a little bit more. And once you start looking for faces, you can see them all over. There's the happy face on Mars. Here's the Indian Head in Canada. This is actually a valley. It's like about 5 miles across, and it's sunk in, even though it looks like it's elevated. That's a road going into it. There's the Google coordinates if you want to look it up yourself. It's a pretty cool thing. But it's a striking feature there. Here's a few more that people send me all the time since I've been collecting these things, of just random things that look like faces. Here's one on the side of a garage door, shadows from a tree. Can you see the lips and the nose? Very sharp. I think my favorite example of this is the nun bun, discovered by a Tennessee baker in 1996 who had it laminated and put on display in his shop for people to come and see. And here's Our Lady of the Chicago Underpass. It's just a water stain, of course, but very religious people got very excited about this, and some not so religious people. Satan loves you. Some people saw something deeply religious and meaningful in this bonfire, which looked a lot like Pope John Paul II. Another one of my favorites is the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich, which sold for $28,500 on eBay, of course, to a Las Vegas casino. What else? But if you can see it up close, it really does look like, well, I don't know what it looks like. You can see there's a bite taken out of the sandwich. I always like that. You know, I don't know what the Virgin Mary is supposed to look like in the iconography of the history of the Catholic Church, but to me it looks a little bit more like maybe Madonna on toast, or perhaps Jane Russell. And when I first saw it, I thought, I know who that looks like. That looks like my mom. That's my mom. She was 17 there. I mean, people don't look like they did back in the 40s. That's wild, isn't it? By the way, if you're wondering what atheists see, nothing there, folks. It's just toast. There's the Virgin Mary on the side of a bank building in Clearwater, Florida. Richard Dawkins, myself, and the Amazing Rain went to visit one year on a Good Friday, no less. And there was quite a few people there with their crutches and canes to be healed. It's quite a striking feature. The bank building was purchased by a Christian church from Michigan, where they then elevated a large crucifix there. So we just walked around the side of the building to see what else was there. And it turns out that Clearwater, Florida isn't. The water is not very clear. It's very mineralized. It kind of stains everything. Stains the windows. All the windows had these stains on them. In fact, I found a miracle on the back side of the building there that I guess that you can only, they started to wipe it off because I guess you can only have one miracle per building. And, so again, what's more likely? Is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it a miracle of Marge? Well, I'm not Catholic, but I am a Simpsons fan, so that's what I saw when I saw that. So let's go back to our thought experiment on the plains of Africa, and you're a small hominid, and you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator, or is it just the wind? What's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? The wind is an inanimate force. A dangerous predator is an intentional agent. So in addition to patternicity, we have agenticity, the tendency to infuse patterns with meaning, intention, and agency, often invisible beings, from the top down. Souls, spirits, ghosts, gods, demons, angels, aliens, intelligent designers, and government conspiracists, and all manner of invisible agents are believed to haunt our world and control our lives. I think it's the basis of animism and polytheism and monotheism and intelligent design. Even aliens are often portrayed as these godlike figures coming down from on high to rescue us. You probably recognize the image from the famous 1951 film, The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's a classic. It's well worth watching again. Not the remake with Keanu Reeves. This is the much better version. It's a Christ allegory. Almost nobody seems to get this. It was so obvious to me when I saw it. So it's a God figure who comes to earth to warn us about our sinful nature. This is 1950, so the sinful nature was nuclear weapons and global nuclear war and so on. Klaatu here, the leader of the planetary society, so to speak, that came to warn us. His name on Earth is Mr. Carpenter, in case you didn't get it. So he's come to talk to the authorities about redemption, sin and redemption, and so on, and threaten with this, super powerful, godlike robot, Gort the robot. But the authorities won't see him, so he goes out to mingle among the common people, as Jesus did. And so he hooks up, so to speak, with the Mary Magdalene character, Patricia Neal, who plays a single mom, and so he ends up as a boarder staying there, and they have kind of a relationship that's not quite clear, like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, it's like, did they or didn't they, because there's that tantalizing passage in one of those fragments that's not part of the canon, but it's part of the Apocrypha, in which it says, and Jesus kissed her on her, and then it's broken off right there. It's like, ooh, her what? Because that kind of tells us something, or could. Anyway, the authorities find out that he's trying to meet with the scientists, these other people that can make a difference, and so they track him down and they kill him, and they put him in the tomb, so to speak. They put him in this cell where his dead body is, and then, so he's already programmed Gort to, in case this happens, to go get him. But Gort needs the instructions. So Patricia Neal character, the Mary Magdalene character, has been instructed by Mr. Carpenter to go deliver this message to Gort to go get him. And so the message, of course, is the famous, one of the most famous lines in all of science fiction, which is, somebody usually knows this, where she goes up and says, Gort, Kalatu Barada Nikto, yes, right. So, and that's basically, come get me out of the tomb and resurrect me. So he does. He goes to the tomb, takes him out of there, like it's been 3 days, takes him back to the ship, lays him out on this table, touches some lights, and he comes back to life. And the Patricia Neal character is sitting there going, wow, you mean this is the power of the future of science and technology? And in the movie, he says, no, only the Great Spirit can do this, or some such thing. In the original script, he says, yeah, that's right. But the Breeding Censorship Board in 1951 said, oh no, you can't tell the American people that this is what science and technology can do. Oh no. So that got deleted out. But my point is that even the description of what aliens are like, they're always these vastly superior, powerful beings that come down from on high and they can control things. So let's look at what's behind the sort of neuroscience behind agenicity. And we'll start with dualism. Dualism is the belief that there are two substances in the world. There's corporeal and incorporeal. There's body and soul. There's brain and mind. And this is why we can watch movies like Freaky Friday and get the plot, understand the humor, where Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis switch bodies. And the teenage girl is now in the corporate boardroom, and the middle-aged mom is now back in high school, and hilarity ensues. And we get it because we intuitively grasp that, yeah, her soul or something switched places, the personality or something like that. And so in many ways we are natural-born dualists. A lot of developmental psychologists have shown us that this starts very, very early, where children have this belief that there's two different substances of this brain and mind, for example. I'm a monist. I just believe there's one substance, just body, no soul, just brain, no mind. The mind is a word we use to describe what the brain does, but there's no mind per se. Now I'm in the minority on this position. Most people are dualists. Even many scientists are dualists. It's such a powerful intuition, I think, that it's hard to get around. And same thing with essentialism. Essentialism is the belief that everything has an essence to it. It's beingness, something that is part of its whole pattern of what it is. A dog has these particular features that make it not a cat, and a cat has these features that make it not an elephant. Everything has an essence to it. That's called essentialism. And our intuitive belief, along with dualism, is that things have an essence to them. For example, in an experiment done by my friend Bruce Hood, the cognitive psychologist, he actually asked subjects, would you wear Mr. Rogers' sweater? Or would you wear Hitler's jacket? Another one was, would you wear Jeffrey Dahmer's sweater? The serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. And he actually put up for sale on eBay Brad Pitt's shirt. Washed or unwashed? Which one do you think fetched the higher price?
Hitler.
Of course, you want the essence of Bradness. Oh, so sexy. And smelled right. So people say they would not wear Hitler's sweater. Why? Because there's like an evil essence to it. Or Jeffrey Dahmer's sweater, there might be something like oozes into my body if I wear it. People that get organ transplants often believe that they take on the characteristics of the organ donor. And so that's that sort of essentialism, that there's something that survives or lives beyond or is separate from the physical body. This is probably located in the temporal lobes, this big green slab of brain tissue that's sort of just above your ears here. It was Wilder Penfield who first started mapping the brain using electrical stimulation. These are often done with epileptic patients who have open brain surgery in order to either cut the corpus callosum to divide the brain to stop the seizures from spreading, or in more recent examples of this where they actually pinpoint where the seizure begins and they put electrodes in there to monitor it, and then they go back in later to destroy the neurons that are actually starting the seizure. It's very sophisticated surgery, and what you can do while you're doing that is ask the patient permission ahead of time and they sign a form. That says, is it okay if we wake you up in the middle of your surgery and poke around with an electrode and ask you what's going on? And amazingly they go, yeah, sure. And so this is much of how much of the brain has been mapped this way. Not the only way, but it's one of the more interesting ways. So it turns out if you touch different areas here in the temporal lobe, you can get people to have a deja vu experience and out-of-body experiences and trance and fugue states. feelings of being in the presence of others, hearing music, hearing angelic voices, intense meaningfulness, connected to a force greater than themselves, talking to God, deja vu experience. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So deep temporal stimulation of inside the limbic system, deep inside the brain. You can get even more sort of intense feelings of intense meaningfulness, depersonalization, connection with God or the cosmos. And this is how we come to understand near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. For many people, these are windows into another world, another dimension, perhaps the next life after this life. That is certainly the belief of this man on the left here. This is Eben Alexander. He's a Harvard neurologist who wrote what is now the best-selling book in America. It's called Proof of Heaven. The proof is he went there. And it turns out that heaven is this very colorful place filled with butterflies and beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed women who love you unconditionally. And when he told me that, I thought, yes, this is something I think could be true. Imagine that, a white guy who thinks that it's just so obvious to me what was going on. Nevertheless, in the green room, I asked him, I kind of asked him politely in a way, you really believe this? I mean, you're not just selling books, right? I didn't say that, but I could tell. He wasn't making this up. He had a very powerful experience. And he truly believes that he went to heaven. Now, he's a neurologist. He knows everything I know about the brain and hallucinations and near-death experiences and oxygen deprivation and all the other things that trigger these kinds of experiences that I'll go through in just a moment. And so we were on with Larry King Now. That's this new show after Larry King Live. And so, yes, he actually said, yes, I'm aware of all that research, but I still believe that what happened to me was different from all those others. I actually went to heaven, whereas all the others were just hallucinations. It's like, I know, but everybody else says that too. And he goes, I know, but mine actually was the real thing. So I reviewed with him, for example, Major General Dr. James Winery of the United States Air Force, who does research on G-force loss of consciousness, or G-lock out-of-body experiences. You accelerate pilots until they pass out as part of their training. A significant percentage of them, as they're passing out, have out-of-body experiences. They kind of float out of their bodies. They go through this sort of the tunnel, the white light at the end of the tunnel. And it's just hypoxia. It's just oxygen deprivation to the cortex. Basically, as you're accelerating, the blood gets pressed to the center of your body and your head, and so the cortex begins to shut down. The last thing to shut down is your brainstem. It's probably a good thing since it runs your heart rate in your lungs. I also pointed out that you can stimulate this particular area of the temporal lobe. This was done in 2003 with an epileptic patient in Germany, and the description of the paper is quite amusing, where they wake her up and she's there lying on the bed in the surgery room, and so they crank up the electricity with the electrode on that spot, and she floats up floats way up above her, and they turn it back down. She goes, oh, now I'm coming back down. Whoop, oh, now I'm way back up here. Now it's my left leg, my right leg, and they're poking around. She wasn't going anywhere, of course. She's just lying there. So the experiences are real, but they're real inside people's heads, not out there, in here. So again, what's more likely, that alien abductions and near-death experiences and all these kinds of experiences people have represent something out there like human-alien contact, or something to do with human psychology? Sleep paralysis is our best explanation we have for these alien abductions. We know several centuries ago that the English referred to nighttime sensations of chest pressure from witches or other supernatural beings as mare, from the Anglo-Saxon mariner, to crush. So a nightmare was the crusher who comes into the night. We know from these narratives accounts, they're very similar to the accounts people give today of near-death experience, or of alien abduction experiences. But they didn't call them aliens back then because they didn't live in the alien-haunted world that we have. They lived in a demon-haunted world filled with these demonic creatures and witches and so on. In other words, we have these neurological experiences that are similar across people in different parts of the world, across generations, across centuries. And your culture tells you what to call it, how to talk about it, what the narrative story is that you're telling about it. Another example is from Michael Persinger's neuroscience lab in which I went and actually tried on his little God helmet there. So these are electromagnets on the there's solenoids on the side of the helmet that bombard your temporal lobes with these magnetic fields. So the idea is that because surgery on the brain is not a good idea for experiments, and ethical committees that approve or disapprove experiments will not approve those experiments, randomly cut open people's heads to poke around. So you can do it with a helmet there. It's not a very powerful effect, it's a pretty subtle effect, but I went and did it and had kind of an out-of-body experience and sort of a sense-presence experience. In the Bleeding Brain, I have a whole chapter on the sense-presence effect. There's lots of ways to stimulate terrific hallucinations. One good way to do it is through sleep deprivation. If you can go 3 or 4 days without sleep, you can have some fantastic hallucinations. They're drug-free and legal. And it's great during finals. It's a good time to do it. And so I've done this before, and lots of people have, though. Long-distance ultramarathon athletes, solo sailors, solo flyers, climbers, particularly when they're alone at high altitude. But it's not just high altitude, because solo sailors get these effects where there's a sense that somebody else is in the room, or next to me, or in the boat, or in the plane at the same time. We're not quite sure what the effect is. It probably has something to do with this dualism, this essentialism, and also where in the brain your self is located, which we don't really know. But there probably is no self, actually. There's just a conglomeration of different brain neural networks and modules that do different things, and somewhere it all gets coordinated into a sense of there's just one of me here. It's me. This is it. Just one brain. Even though it's a lot of different things going on up there. And so if something artificially stimulates a sense that there's somebody else here, a second self, there's only one self. So the other self must be in the room, out there. In the same way that, say, schizophrenics or others hear voices, they really hear the voices out there. Even though we now know with brain scanning techniques and brain monitoring techniques that people, when they hallucinate, say auditory hallucinations, their auditory pathways in their brain are lighting up, they're active, they're activated. Even though there's no sound out there stimulating it, they experience it as out there. So this is what happened to even Alexander. He says his brain was completely shut down, and that he was dead. Well, if you're dead, you can't be sitting here talking to me and Larry King. So you weren't actually dead. There's a reason they're called near-death experiences. The people aren't actually dead. That's a big difference. The brain is still activated. There's still portions of the brain recording these memories that he had enough memories to write a book, which I said, you had enough memories to write a book, so somehow they got stored somewhere in your brain, right? And he goes, well, we don't really know where. Yeah, we do, the hippocampus and so on. Okay, but maybe if the hippocampus is shut down, they're stored somewhere else, to which I said, and where would that be? Well, it could be, like a quantum consciousness. I said, Deepak, easy now. So my point here is that all belief is mediated by the brain. Mind is just a word for what the brain does. If a portion of the brain is lost, just think about it. Just think, this is true. Alzheimer's patients, as their brain begins to shrink, as they get the plaques and tangles and the neurons die, everything gets smaller, it shrinks, the brain shrinks. Their body seems to shrink a little bit. They sort of get hunched over. Their gait gets smaller. Their handwriting gets tiny. Their memory begins to disappear. Their personality shrinks. Everything is gone. No brain, no mind. Strokes, tumors, brain damage. That portion of the brain that gets lost, the function, its mind, is gone. Unless, of course, as Deepak likes to point out to me, you rewire it through various techniques of meditation, things like this. But that's the point. You have to have the wires to rewire, or else there's no mind at all. So that's the power of belief, is that it's in the brain, but there's no evidence that there's something that survives the brain. So that then would say something about the afterlife. And so, by the way, people are often asking me what my position is on the afterlife, and so I'm for it. Just put it on the record. But again, the fact that I'm for it doesn't make it true, right? All right, so I'm going to finish up by just sort of wrapping up a few examples. We talked about the priming effect at the beginning. You prime the brain to see and hear, and it will obey. And so my favorite example of this is what's called backward masking, where some of you have already seen this before, where if you play a portion of a song backwards, you can hear hidden messages within it. So what I'm going to do is just a little demonstration of this. If you've already seen it, it's okay. It's worth hearing again. So I'll play a portion of this song forward with the words on the screen, and then I'll play a portion of that same song backwards without the words on the screen. We have to listen for the hidden message. And then I'll play it for you with the hidden message, essentially priming the brain, and then you'll hear it. Okay, so here it is, forward.
If there's a button in your head, don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the main queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go back, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Now, I'm not sure what it means forward, actually, but when I was in high school, this was deeply meaningful. So here it is backwards. So you have to listen for the hidden demonic message, you know, about what's really going on there. But I won't put the words on the screen. You just have to listen for it.
It's my sweet
Those of you who have not seen this before, what did you get? Satan? Yeah, Satan is kind of powerful. What else? Sexy? Sex? Yeah, okay. Right? Again, what you are thinking a lot about often determines what you... All right, here we go. Here it is with the prime. You don't want to go anywhere near that tool shed. That's a very dangerous place. Oh, the tool shed. So in part what's going on here is the confirmation bias in addition to priming, where there's a tendency to seek and find confirming evidence for what we already believe and to ignore the disconfirming evidence. Everybody does it. It's across the board in all our beliefs, political beliefs, economic ideologies, religious beliefs. If you give a Democrat a proposal for a modification of the health care and you tell them it's written by a Democrat, they'll rate it very favorably. If you tell them it's written by a Republican, they'll rip it to shreds. Likewise, or the reverse with Republicans. Everybody does this. We just try to find the evidence that fits. It works for explaining how psychics work. This was when I did a Psychic for the Day readings for a show with Bill Nye, the Science Guy, in which we did a series of readings, and in essence, the people getting the reading are doing the reading. You just ask them a lot of questions. This is how Sylvia Brown, for example, does it when she unsuccessfully predicts that Amanda Berry is dead. Is this the most despicable thing you've ever seen? Have you seen this story now coming out? This psychic Sylvia Brown appeared on Montel Williams with the mother of Amanda, who asked if she's still alive. She said, "No, honey, she's dead." And she issued a statement yesterday saying, "Well, I'm usually right. I'm right more often than I am wrong." I was glad to see Anderson Cooper last night close the show saying she should have just said, "And I have no shame." It really is quite despicable what these psychics do. I mean, they really play on people's emotions and the desire, of course, not to lose a loved one. And so it's a con. It really is. It's just a scam. It's a con. It's called cold reading. You You just repeat a lot of things that are true for most people. So we spent a day filming. I did tarot card readings, astrological readings, poem readings, and psychic readings.
There are people who say they can connect with the spirits of the deceased and that they can predict the future. Those are pretty extraordinary claims. And the proof? Well, it's always been less than extraordinary. Now, some people say that extrasensory perception is beyond science, and maybe it is. But here at NILabs, we conducted a little experiment to see just how easy it is to make it look like you have psychic powers. We invited Dr. Michael Shermer, the publisher of Skeptic magazine, to come and read people's futures.
Okay, hang on for a second. So, one of the things that I did here in preparation was there's a book of how to do cold readings, and it has hundreds of things that you can say that are true for most people. Like one of them is there's something about a white car. I'm getting something about a white. No matter who it is you're talking to, they always find some connection to a white car. Or did you scrape your knee? Something about scraping your knee, because everybody is at some point in their life has scraped their knee. Did you used to wear your hair longer? You have an earring that you're missing. There's a drawer that's stuck. You have a Post-it note that's old. There's hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of things. So getting a red dress and so on. People will find meaning in those. So when you see me doing these, you'll see where these come from here. So go back to that.
There's something, I'm getting something about a scar on your knee, on your left knee, or you scraped your knees or something.
I scraped my knee.
You did?
Yeah.
Was this recently or?
A couple of weeks ago. The thing about the knee was funny because I haven't scraped my knees in like 12 years, but I did just a couple of weeks ago. I fell down.
So this card tells us that there is a dominant. There's two things going on here. There is some spirituality in your life, either traditional religion or, if not traditional, at least a strong component of some sort of spirituality. Does that make any sense? How does it?
In different ways. Like when I was younger, my father was a Baptist minister.
Well, there you go.
He wasn't stretching so much. I think he was pulling from things that were coming out of the cards, rather than pulling things from me.
There's, there's just a couple of weird little things I'm getting. I'm seeing a white car. I don't know what a white car means. If this is somebody in your family or your friend or something like that.
My grandma has a white car, and my friend from high school has a white car.
I told you, I started off saying I'm getting a couple of people here that are an influence. So I wonder if this other one with the white car thing is the grandmother. I wonder if it's grandmother sort of coming through in a sense.
Something that he picked up on that did surprise me was about the white car. I don't really know where that came from. I think that I will think about my grandma a little bit and maybe talk to her a little bit more.
So, Michael, you've never done this before?
Nope, never done it.
How long did you spend preparing for this session?
I prepared yesterday, basically one day.
So that's it. It's not hard to do. It's painfully easy, actually, and you can imagine with some experience how good you could get at fooling people if you had a whole database of things you could throw out. A lot of these I learned from a friend of mine who worked for the Psychic Friends Network. When he joined them, they give you a booklet, this 3-ring binder, that has all these things that you can say to keep people on the line at $3.95 a minute. And you go through the 4 big categories: love, health, money, and career. You know, I sense that, you're having some financial concerns right now. Who doesn't? And, I see travel in your future. You're thinking of changing your job. You have some health concerns, and so on and so on. Burn a purple candle and have a you just make this stuff up. And the people will do the reading. They'll remember the hits. They'll forget the misses, and so on. So I'm going to end by sort of putting all these things together: priming effects, the confirmation bias, and one final one, expectation violation, has to do with patternicity. We set up a pattern of A, B, C, D, and you expect this to happen, and something else happens. This is how humor works. This is how magic works. We're surprised at this little twist at the end. So I'll finish with this video clip that kind of puts all this together.
This is the venue they chose for their fake auditions for an advert for lip balm.
We're hoping that we can use part of this in a national commercial, right? And this is a test on some lip balms that we have over here. And these are our models who are going to help us, Roger and Matt. And we have our own lip balm, and we have a leading brand. Would you have any problem kissing our models today? I think that was fine.
That would be fine.
Okay. So that this is a blind test, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put a blindfold on. Okay, now can you see anything?
No.
Hold up so you can't even see down. It's completely blind now, right? Okay. Now what I'm going to be looking for in this test is the texture, and maybe if you can discern any flavor or not. Have you ever done a kissing test before? Okay, now I'm going to ask you to pucker up big and lean in just a little bit, okay?
Shermer's agreed to field some questions if anybody has any. We have microphones set up at the back corner of the floor. If you have a question, feel free to get up and form a line. And
oh, back there, okay.
Yeah,
or else I could just shout it.
Both sides.
Go ahead, I'll just repeat it.
Yeah, so you said you're a monist, not a dualist.
Yes.
But there are more dualists than monists.
Yeah.
What's your reason, if there is one, for choosing the minority?
Did you hear that, the monist versus dualist position, and why? Because I think it's correct, and that our intuitions are not always accurate, and but basically because of the examples I gave, that we know enough about the brain, how the brain works now, and the power of the brain to generate these experiences. Just read any of Oliver Sacks' books. The man who mistook his wife for a hat, those sorts of things. I mean, very powerful. But we can clearly identify where that's going on. Now, the only counter argument to that is that we don't yet have a good neuroscience explanation for consciousness. That is what you and I are doing now. We're consciously aware of ourselves, and I'm aware of you. You're aware of me, and I'm aware that you're aware that I'm aware of you. And this whole mind reading thing that we do, this is real mind reading, not the phony stuff. By the way, I should point out that anybody can talk to the dead. It's getting the dead to talk back, that's the hard part. Right? So we all mind read in this way. But that's all a product of the brain. And there's just so many examples of this. I mean, you could just stimulate or destroy certain areas, very, very narrowly specific areas of the brain, and the function either just turns on or off, based on that. Now, like someone like Deepak says, well, but yeah, of course you need a radio receiver to get the radio signals coming in. It's like, yeah, but we can measure the radio signals. What would be the equivalent in that metaphor for mind or consciousness coming from somewhere else? And he says quantum physics. So the prevailing theory seems to be that because we have these spooky quantum experiments in which subatomic particles are entangled, such that if you spin one subatomic particle a certain way, it causes another subatomic particle. It could be on the other side of the room, it could be on the other side of the planet, it could be on the other side of the galaxy, to instantly be affected. So they are entangled, they're connected, across vast distances of space, and maybe mind is something like that. Okay. The fact that consciousness is spooky and weird and quantum physics is spooky and weird doesn't mean they're in any way connected. There's just a lot of spooky and weird things in life. You know, they're not necessarily causally connected. So that's basically why. Yes?
What's the evolutionary what would be the evolutionary benefit to belief?
What's the evolutionary benefit to belief? Well, basically the whole model I presented of patternicity and type 1 and type 2 errors is that it just begins with the survival mechanism of learning. And beliefs are just built on top of that. So complex beliefs, like political beliefs or religious beliefs, these are enveloped in our social groups. So there's a social component to them, but it's still just part of the basic fundamental neurology of belief. So you have to believe things to survive. And you have to believe things instantly, quickly. So all the research in cognitive psychology, like Danny Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a very good book I recommend after you read The Believing Brain. Just kidding. And it shows that most of the decisions we make are made under great levels of uncertainty, snap decisions, rapid cognition. We do not walk into a store and analyze carefully each and every product. You know, like, let's see which toothpaste has the proper ingredients. It's like, no, I like the blue one. Boom. In it goes, off to the next thing. That's how we make most of our decisions. That's not always good, like, you know, who you're going to marry. I'll just take the blue one. Unfortunately, and that's why we have multiple marriages. Anyway, but that is how we decide. It happens rapidly. And in a natural environment, it has to happen that way. There's no time to sit around and collect data. And most of the time, like all these social psych experiments that show how gullible we are to follow leaders in our social group, like the smoke in the room, and you know everybody else is ignoring the smoke coming in under the door, and the subject is sitting there filling out their form, ignoring it. How stupid can they be? Yeah, but normally, if you're with a group of a bunch of people like you that are not working for the experimenter, and smoke comes in the room, people usually do something about it. So it's reasonable to follow the group that way, and so that's why we fall for those things. Yep.
Hi. The experiments with ESP, you probably know the author, I can't remember right now, who wrote up this experiment that was done. These two gentlemen who seemed to be able to communicate from a far distance, and they set it up in the most scientifically perfect way that they could. And there was simultaneous thought from different places on the planet. As provable and as scientifically provable as it could have been.
Right.
What do you think?
What do I think? Well, I'm skeptical. You might not be surprised. Okay, there's a couple things going on there. First of all, there's half a dozen different protocols that are used to test ESP. You could do like what I was doing in the Khan Academy video with the Zener cards. You know, it's a star, it's a circle, whatever. You just got 10 in a row, really? No. In fact, when you do those have been done in serious experiments, and nobody ever does better than chance. Now, outside of the experimental paradigm, somehow people do way better than chance. But as soon as you control for other intervening variables like cheating or getting the information some other natural means, then the effects disappear. Now, occasionally you'll see a paper published in which they said, we did control for everything, and it was statistically significant. And it's published in a peer-reviewed journal. It's like, okay. And then, so people go to replicate it, and they can't replicate it. So whenever an experiment is non-replicable, that is a sign that something was wrong probably with the original one. And this problem is not just part of ESP research. It's actually part of a lot of science. There's a lot of science, particularly medical research, that gets published, you know, coffee causes this, or, you know, whatever. And then no one's able to replicate it. And unfortunately, most journals don't like to publish non-replicable experiments. So that is non-effects. Now there's a little push now to start some journals that publish nothing but replicated experiments and no results, where they get nothing. I mean, it's good to know that coffee causes X, but it's also good to know that coffee doesn't cause X. That's equally important, but journals don't care about that. So that's a built-in problem with all of science. But in any case, the bottom line is after a century of serious ESP research, nobody has consistently found replicated effects under controlled conditions. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead.
This is kind of similar to the singularity question. Since the functions of the mind is no more than like neurological connections between the brain, do you believe an artificial intelligence can reach the cognitions of a human mind?
Yeah, maybe. But again, we don't know how we achieve consciousness yet. There's not a good, there's no consensus among neuroscientists about how consciousness arises from neurons firing. I'm not talking about like how language works and that kind of thing. I mean, being aware of the environment, the experience of love or redness or whatever, that sort of thing. We don't know how that's done. So until we know, we can't really program a computer to do it. It may just happen. It may happen organically. Data all of a sudden is self-aware, and you run that experiment, something like that, where is he an individual or is he not? And then you get into those are the philosophizing questions. Yes.
Do you think that it's an equal mistake to say that things don't exist as it is to say that they do exist without evidence?
Yes, I do. So for me to prove that, she's talking about existence versus non-existence, I can't prove there is no God or unicorns or whatever, although some people dispute that, even that statement. In science, we don't even talk like that, actually. We just say what's probably true or probably not true. What are provisional truths? Steve Gould once defined facts as something confirmed to such a degree it would be perverse to withhold our provisional assent. Apples may start to rise tomorrow when I throw them up, but it's so unlikely, I really don't need to worry about that. Right? And it's possible there's a Bigfoot somewhere out there in the hinterlands. I met a Bigfoot follower last week. They want to be taken seriously, and they know that people kind of laugh about the Bigfoot thing, so they've changed the name. It's the wood ape. And you look this up. They are the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. I heard this, I thought, wow, these guys must be serious. I look it up, it's like, oh, it's Bigfoot. Oh, Bigfoot. Okay, can I prove there's no Bigfoot? No, because I haven't looked at every last corner of the globe. But given how long people have been looking, how many cameras everybody has now, and the fact that all big species have been pretty much found, that new species that are found are microscopic, small bugs and things like that. Not likely, very unlikely. Extraterrestrials, okay, this is a slightly different problem because Carl Sagan used to say that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, okay, but it's a vast universe, and we've only looked at that amount of it, so we've got a long ways to go. It'd be unwise to say we're alone. But people often mistake that for saying, oh, so you mean it's possible aliens have come here? No, that's a separate question. Are they out there? Have they come here? Two completely separate questions. Let's go here. Right. Question on psychics, world famous psychics that help police solve crimes, find missing people, and so on. They don't. Basically, the effect is that they say they do, and nobody checks. And so, well, she said she helped people, help the police find the guy. Right, did you call the police and ask them if she helped? Because when you do, they go, no. or what it is that the police put out a call for people to send in tips to help find missing people. The psychic calls in and say, I think the body's out there in the woods somewhere. Well, that's helpful. I mean, it'd be nice if one of these psychics, for once, would tell us where these missing people are. You're talking to them. While you're talking to them, ask them, hey, where are you? I mean, like, look out and see a street sign or something. Give us a clue. Where is Osama bin Laden? I mean, how about one of these psychics that knew 9/11 was going to happen? How come they didn't tell us? And so, what cave is he in? Okay, so this is the problem with psychics. They can't actually do what they say they can do. And when you push them and when you check and when you put them under controlled conditions, it all goes away. How about here?
To what extent would you say it's safe or healthy to believe, like the grilled cheese Mary or all those things? To what extent do you think it's safe to believe?
Oh, safe to believe those. Okay, so I guess what you're asking is what's the harm in believing these things? Well, I mean, people that read say they're astrology column for fun or entertainment purposes. It seems innocuous enough. The problem is that once you go down the road of believing one nonsensical thing, you'll believe other nonsensical things. And then pretty soon you're into the realm of political beliefs.
and economics. I'll never forget when we didn't find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And the administration's answer was, well, we know that they had them because they're not there, so they moved them. And I remember thinking, that's the same argument the UFO people make about Roswell. When I ask them, well, where's the spacecraft? They go, oh, they moved them. That's how we know they're real, because they hid them. What? No. You have to have positive evidence in favor of your theory, not just negative evidence against the other theory, right? This is the mistake that the creationists make. They think if they can find one little thing that I can't explain, their whole theory must be right. No, it's just we can't explain everything. But the prevailing theory has 10,000 pieces of evidence for it. Your theory has 0 pieces of evidence for it. Which one should we believe? Okay? So that's how we phrase it. That we have to look for positive evidence, not just negative evidence. So we have somebody over here.
What's your view on the Christian belief and why do people believe in it?
What's my view on the Christian belief and why do people believe in it? Which Christian belief? You mean Jesus and all that? Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. I think it's a myth and story like all the others. And there's nothing particularly, if you were an anthropologist from Mars and you came to Earth and you studied the 10,000 different religions over the last 10,000 years, no one of them would stand out as particularly unusual. They all make claims about the way the world is, and the claims are not based in fact, they're based on something else. I guess the shortest way on that particular one would be on the Jesus story. So, as I understand it, because I used to be one, for about 7 years I was a born-again evangelical. So here's the story, is that God and Jesus are both one and the same. You know, it's like 1 and 3, 3 and 1, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, but they're all one thing. They're all God. And Jesus was Lord, although he's the Son of God, but he's God. So you have to accept Jesus to be saved from your original sin that you didn't commit, that somebody else committed. And if you don't, then you will go to hell. You do not get to go to heaven. And so in essence what it's saying is that God sacrificed himself to himself to save us from himself. This is barking mad. This makes no sense at all if you think about it in those terms. Now, last year I was on stage for a Christian church. I was on stage as this minister. Very nice guy, we were having a conversation. And I laid it out just like that. I said, barking mad. And he said, well, when you put it that way, yeah. It's like, is there some other way to put it that it doesn't sound barking mad? He's like, oh no. But of course, Scientology, Mormonism, they all have beliefs that to the outsider they sound barking mad. When you're in it, as I was, when you're in it, it makes all kinds of sense. It's internally coherent, it's logical, it feels right, makes sense, the whole world falls into place. And that's the power of religion. It's a social force that holds people together, reinforces your beliefs, protects you from outside critics and skeptics and so forth, and unites people, often in good ways, often not in good ways. And so I don't think religion's going away anytime soon, although I think people are more sensitive to the dangers of some religions in the last 10 years or so, obvious reasons. All right, let's go right here.
Yes, finally. Do you believe we have control in our decisions?
Control of our decisions?
Yes.
I have no choice but to believe that.
No, new research suggests that we don't.
That's
From the brain scans, they suggest that our brain knows what we're going to do 10 seconds before.
He's referring to these interesting experiments in which you put subjects in a brain scanner and you give them a little task. They're in there with a little keypad and you give them choices in the monitors and these little goggles you have on, and they push a button. And scanning the brain, you can see in the motor neurons which button the guy's going to push before he's even decided which button to push. That's kind of scary. That means a lot of what we're
we're deciding to do somebody else. Well, wait a minute. Not somebody else. You're deciding. But this gets back to the problem I mentioned. Well, where's the self? If there's some part of your brain that makes the decision that some other part of your brain that milliseconds or seconds later becomes aware of, it's still you, but there's multiple yous. But it doesn't feel like there's multiple yous. So it's an illusion that there's one you. And that's why that effect happens. It's still you, though. Don't worry, there's no little homunculus in there pulling the levers and you're like, stop that, stop that. Yes, sir.
Do you see any applications here medicinally for people with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's?
Yes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, right. The question is, are there applications here for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's? Yes, of course, but I tend to be an optimist by temperament, but I've been discouraged lately by the minuscule amounts of progress that have been made in those two areas. And I've had family members, close family members that have suffered both, so I'm very aware of the research on it. And 30 years ago, they were making predictions about where we'd be with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's by now, and we're not even remotely close to there. It's like cancer. It's like that irresponsible Time magazine cover story last month. Cancer, we're just about got it solved. No, we don't. And if you read the article, it says, no, we're not even close. But there's some areas that could get us there. Okay. So these are really hard problems. And I just think it's just going to take a long time to solve those big ones. On the Alzheimer's thing, I'm really hoping Kurzweil and these guys are right and that they'll figure it out before I get there, because so I keep doing my Sudoku puzzles and trying to keep my brain going, in case and every time I forget a celebrity's name, I think, oh no, is this it? It's like, no, it's okay to forget celebrities' names. Let's see. How about in the back there, anybody? Okay, let's do one last one here.
Do you have any thoughts on why a lot of people vote against their own interests?
Like what? Vote against their own interests, he said. Like what?
Yeah. Well, the distribution of resources as we have them now, instead of coming down maybe at the people level, maybe more at the corporate level.
Oh, a political question.
Yeah.
That would be a question that a liberal would ask. A conservative wouldn't even ask that question. So that alone tells us that that's in a different realm than sort of the factual realm of science. I would have to almost punt on that question and say that conservatives don't believe people are voting against their own interests. They actually think that lower tax rates produce greater wealth for everybody. And liberals would completely disagree with that. And how you resolve that one, that's a much harder problem than neuroscience. That's why we have democracies and elections. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite you all to refreshments in the lobby as well as a book signing. Thank you.